The rain had slowed to a drizzle by the time John finished changing Claire's tire. As he packed away his tools, he couldn't help but notice how different their lives seemed. Claire stood there in her neatly pressed clothes, holding an umbrella that barely shielded her from the damp air. She looked out of place on the side of this muddy road like someone who belonged in a boardroom or a fancy restaurant rather than standing next to a car with a flat tire. Meanwhile, John was soaked through, his jeans spattered with mud and his hands greasy from working on the lug nuts. Despite their differences, though, there was something oddly comforting about the moment, a shared humanity in the middle of an otherwise ordinary day. Claire tried to offer him the $20 bill again, but John refused once more. "Really, it's no trouble," he said with a smile that came easily despite his exhaustion. "It's just what anyone would do." He didn't say it to sound noble. He truly believed it. Helping people was part of who he was, even if life hadn't exactly been kind to him lately. Whether it was fixing a neighbor's lawnmower or giving directions to a lost tourist, John always found a way to lend a hand when he could. It wasn't about getting anything in return. It was simply the right thing to do. As they talked, Claire mentioned she'd only recently moved to town for work. "I'm still figuring everything out here," she admitted, laughing nervously. "This whole adulting thing is harder than I thought." John chuckled at that. "You'll get the hang of it," he said reassuringly. "And hey, if you ever need advice on cars or anything else, feel free to ask." Her face softened, and for a moment she looked genuinely grateful. "Thank you," she said quietly. "Not just for changing the tire, but for stopping in the first place. Not everyone would have done that." John shrugged modestly. "Like I said, it's no big deal." But deep down he knew it was a big deal for both of them. For Claire, stranded and unsure of what to do next, his simple act of kindness had made all the difference. And for John, helping her reminded him of why he kept pushing through the tough days. Even when life felt overwhelming, moments like these gave him hope. They reminded him that good things could still happen even in the smallest ways. Before leaving, Claire handed him her business card. "If you're ever in the area or need anything, don't hesitate to reach out," she said, warmly. John glanced at the card, noting the sleek design and the title beneath her name. CEO, Bennett Tech Solutions. The name sounded familiar, though he couldn't quite place it. Still, he tucked the card into his pocket without giving it much thought. To him, it was just a polite gesture, nothing more. After all, what could someone like Claire possibly offer him? A struggling single dad with 3 part-time jobs and barely enough energy to keep up with his kids? A few weeks passed and life went on as usual for John. He continued balancing his hectic schedule, juggling shifts at the garage, late-night grocery deliveries, and weekend office cleanings. The memory of Claire faded into the background, replaced by the endless list of responsibilities waiting for him each day. Emma needed new school supplies. Liam's soccer cleats were falling apart, and the car he drove was starting to make strange noises every time he turned the key. There was never a dull moment, and John often found himself wondering how much longer he could keep going like this. One evening, after finishing a delivery route, John decided to treat himself to dinner at a local diner. It wasn't anything fancy, just a cozy little spot with vinyl booths and neon signs buzzing faintly in the window. But it was one of the few places where he could sit down and relax, even if only for a short while. He ordered a burger and fries, savoring the rare moment of quiet as he scrolled through his phone to check messages from his kids' teachers. That's when he saw her. Sitting in a booth near the window was Claire, looking just as polished as she had the last time he'd seen her. Across from her sat 2 sharply dressed men, poring over documents spread across the table. Their conversation was animated, filled with terms like quarterly projections and market trends. John hesitated for a moment, unsure whether to approach her or not. But before he could decide, Claire spotted him and waved enthusiastically. "John! What a coincidence!" she called out, motioning for him to join them. Feeling slightly awkward, John walked over, wiping his hands on his jeans as he approached. "Hi, Claire," he said, nodding politely at the others. "Didn't expect to see you here." Claire introduced him to her colleagues, explaining that they were senior executives at her company. "This is the man I told you about. The one who helped me change my tire," she added proudly. Her tone made it clear she hadn't forgotten their encounter, and John felt a flicker of embarrassment. He wasn't used to being the center of attention, especially not in situations like this. "You must be some kind of superhero," one of the executives joked, shaking John's hand. "Saving damsels in distress and all that." John laughed, nervously. "Hardly. Just doing what anyone else would have done." After exchanging pleasantries, Claire handed him her business card again. This time, she pressed it into his hand firmly. "Seriously, John, don't lose this one," she said with a playful smile. "If you ever need anything at all, please let me know. I mean it." He nodded, tucking the card into his pocket once more. "Thanks, Claire. I appreciate it." But as he walked back to his booth, he couldn't shake the feeling that her words carried more weight than they appeared to. There was something genuine in her voice, something that hinted at more than just polite gratitude. Back home later, that night John found himself thinking about Claire, and not just because of her impressive job title. It was the way she carried herself, confident yet approachable, successful yet humble. She reminded him of Sarah in some ways, not physically but in the way she radiated warmth and sincerity. It was a quality that drew people in, making them feel valued and respected. As he sat at the kitchen table, flipping through the stack of bills piled high in front of him, John glanced at Claire's business card lying nearby. He wondered what her life was like outside of work. Did she have family? Friends? Hobbies? Or was she so consumed by her career that she rarely had time for anything else? Whatever the case, he admired her drive and determination. Running a company like Bennett Tech Solutions, that took guts. And yet, despite her success, she hadn't forgotten the importance of kindness. That alone made her stand out in John's eyes. For now, though, he pushed those thoughts aside. Life was busy enough without adding distractions. Tomorrow would bring another long day of work, followed by homework help for Emma and bedtime stories for Liam. Those were the priorities, the things that mattered most. Still, as he drifted off to sleep that night, John couldn't help but wonder if fate might have something unexpected in store for him. After all, sometimes the smallest actions could lead to the biggest changes, and maybe, just maybe, helping Claire change her tire had set something extraordinary in motion. John Miller wasn't just another face in the crowd. He was a man who carried the weight of the world on his shoulders, yet somehow managed to keep moving forward. At 34 years old, life had thrown more challenges at him than most people face in a lifetime. His days were long, his nights even longer, and his worries never seemed to end. But through it all, there was one thing that kept him going: his two children, Emma and Liam. Emma was 8, full of curiosity and laughter, with a love for drawing pictures of their family. Liam, just 5, was a bundle of energy who could light up any room with his infectious smile. They were John's entire world, his reason for waking up every morning despite the exhaustion that clung to him like a second skin. The kids didn't understand everything their dad did for them. They were too young, but they knew he worked hard, and they loved him fiercely for it. John's wife, Sarah, had been the glue that held their little family together. She was kind, patient, and endlessly supportive. When she passed away suddenly 2 years ago after a brief illness, it felt like the ground beneath John's feet had crumbled. Suddenly, he wasn't just a husband, he was now a single father, juggling 3 part-time jobs to make ends meet. He worked as a mechanic during the day, fixing cars at a small garage on the outskirts of town. In the evenings, he delivered groceries for a local supermarket, navigating narrow streets and climbing countless stairs to drop off bags of food. And if that wasn't enough, he spent his weekends cleaning offices late into the night, scrubbing floors and emptying trash cans while the rest of the world slept. It was a grueling routine, but John didn't complain. Not out loud anyway. Complaining wouldn't bring Sarah back or put food on the table. Instead, he focused on what mattered most: giving Emma and Liam a stable home and making sure they never doubted how much they were loved. Still, no matter how hard he tried, there, were moments when the pressure became overwhelming, like when the water heater broke and he had to choose between repairing it or paying the electric bill, or when Emma came home crying because her classmate said her sneakers were old. Those moments made him feel like he was failing, even though he knew deep down that he was doing the best he could. One rainy afternoon, as John drove home from another exhausting shift at the garage, the sky outside was dark and heavy with clouds. The windshield wipers struggled to keep up with the downpour, and the roads were slick with rainwater. Traffic crawled along slowly, horns honking impatiently as drivers grew frustrated with the weather. It was the kind of day that made you want to stay indoors, curled up under a blanket with a cup of tea. But John didn't have that luxury. He still had errands to run and kids to take care of before he could even think about resting. As he rounded a bend near the edge of town, something caught his eye. A car parked haphazardly on the shoulder of the road, its hazard lights blinking, urgently. A woman stood beside it holding an umbrella and looking utterly lost. Her vehicle was dangerously close to the speeding traffic behind her, and John immediately felt a pang of concern. Without thinking twice, he signaled and pulled over onto the shoulder, parking his own beat-up sedan a few feet ahead of hers. Grabbing his toolkit from the trunk, John approached the stranded driver. Up close, he could see that she was younger than he'd initially thought, probably in her early 30s. She wore a tailored blazer and trousers that looked expensive, though they were now damp from the rain. Her hair was tucked neatly under a scarf, and her expression was a mix of frustration and helplessness. "Hi," John said, raising his voice slightly to be heard over the sound of rain hitting the pavement. "Looks like you're having some trouble." The woman turned to him, relief washing over her features. "Oh, thank goodness," she said, clutching her umbrella tightly. "Yes, well, I don't know much about cars. My tire's flat, and I've been waiting for roadside assistance for almost an hour. No one's shown up yet." John nodded, sympathetically. Flat tires were a common problem, especially in this kind of weather. "Don't worry," he reassured her. "I can help you change it. Won't take long." She hesitated, glancing at him uncertainly. "Are you sure? I wouldn't want to impose." "It's no imposition," John replied with a warm smile. "Happens to everyone. Besides, it's not safe for you to be standing here with all this traffic." Reluctantly, she nodded, stepping aside as John knelt down to assess the situation. As he worked, loosening lug nuts and positioning the jack, they chatted casually. Her name was Claire Bennett, she explained, and she'd recently moved to town for work. She admitted sheepishly that she didn't know the first thing about car maintenance, having always relied on others to handle such tasks. "You'll learn," John said lightly, trying to put her at ease. "Or at least memorize where the spare tire is kept. Comes in handy." Claire laughed softly, watching as he expertly swapped out the flat tire for the spare. Despite the dreary weather and the stress of the situation, there was something comforting about his calm demeanor. He didn't seem bothered by the rain soaking through his shirt or the mud staining his hands. If anything, he appeared completely at ease, as though helping strangers was second nature to him. When the job was done, Claire thanked him profusely, pressing a $20 bill into his hand. "Please let me repay you," she insisted. "You've been so kind." But John shook his head firmly, pushing the money back toward her. "No need," he said simply. "Just glad I could help." With that, he gathered his tools and returned to his car, waving goodbye as he drove off. Claire stood there for a moment, watching his taillights disappear into the distance. There was something remarkable about the man who had stopped to help her, she thought. Something genuine and selfless that stayed with her long after the rain had stopped falling. Life has a way of testing people, and John Miller was no stranger to its challenges. Despite his best efforts to stay afloat, the weight of his responsibilities often felt unbearable. The days blurred together in a haze of work, bills, and sleepless nights, leaving little room for anything else. But John never complained, at least not out loud. He reminded himself daily that he was doing this for Emma and Liam, and as long as they were happy, he could endure whatever came his way. Months passed since his chance encounter with Claire Bennett, and John had all but forgotten about her business card tucked away in his wallet. It wasn't that he didn't appreciate her kindness. It's just that life had become so overwhelming that there wasn't much time to think about anything beyond survival. His old car, which had faithfully carried him through countless shifts and errands, finally gave up the ghost one chilly morning. The engine sputtered weakly before dying completely, leaving John stranded in the driveway with a sinking feeling in his chest. The timing couldn't have been worse. Without a car, commuting between his 3 jobs would be nearly impossible. Public transportation in their small town was unreliable at best, and walking wasn't an option given the distances involved. For the first time in weeks, John allowed himself to sit down and truly consider how dire his situation had become. The stack of unpaid bills on the kitchen table seemed to mock him, each envelope a reminder of how close he was to losing everything. Despair crept in like a shadow, threatening to swallow him whole. That night, as Emma and Liam slept peacefully upstairs, John sat alone in the dim light of the living room. His mind raced with possibilities, none of them good. He thought about borrowing money from friends or family, but pride, and the knowledge that they likely couldn't afford to help, stopped him cold. He considered selling some of their belongings, but what little they owned was already stretched thin. Just when it felt like hope was slipping away entirely, his eyes landed on Claire's business card lying forgotten on the counter. At first, he hesitated. Reaching out to someone like Claire, a successful CEO who probably had more important things to worry about, felt presumptuous. What could she possibly do for him? Still, something about her sincerity during their brief interactions lingered in his memory. She hadn't just handed him her card as a polite gesture. She genuinely meant it when she said to call if he needed anything. Taking a deep breath, John decided to send her a short email, not asking for help directly, but simply updating her on how life had been treating him since their meeting. If nothing else, it might ease the heaviness pressing down on his chest. To his astonishment, Claire responded within hours. Her reply was warm and encouraging, inviting him to meet her at her office the next day. "I'd love to catch up," she wrote, "and maybe we can figure out a solution together." John read the message several times, unsure whether to feel hopeful or skeptical. Was this real? Could someone like Claire actually make a difference in his chaotic world? Doubt gnawed at him, but curiosity won out. He agreed to meet her, telling himself it wouldn't hurt to hear what she had to say. The following afternoon, John found himself standing outside the sleek glass building that housed Bennett Tech Solutions. It was a far cry from the modest neighborhoods and dusty garages he was used to. The lobby buzzed with activity, employees moving briskly between meetings while soft jazz played over hidden speakers. Everything about the place screamed success, and John suddenly felt out of place in his worn jeans and scuffed boots. He half expected security to turn him away, but instead, a receptionist greeted him warmly and escorted him to Claire's office. Claire rose from behind her desk as soon as he entered, her smile genuine and welcoming. "John, thank you for coming," she said, gesturing for him to take a seat. Her office was spacious yet tastefully decorated, with framed awards lining the walls and a panoramic view of the city skyline. For a moment, John felt like he'd stepped into another world, one where problems were solved with the stroke of a pen rather than endless hours of labor. "So," Claire began after offering him a cup of coffee, "how are things going?" John hesitated, unsure how much to share. Finally, he settled on honesty. "Not great," he admitted. "My car broke down, and without it I can't get to my jobs. Bills are piling up and, well, let's just say I'm struggling." Claire listened, intently, her expression thoughtful. When he finished speaking, she leaned forward slightly. "John, I admire your determination. You've been working nonstop to provide for your kids, and that says a lot about the kind of person you are. But sometimes even the strongest people need a helping hand." Her words caught him off guard. No one had ever spoken to him like that, like his struggles mattered, like he mattered. Before he could respond, she continued, "I want to offer you a job here at Bennett Tech. not as a mechanic but as our new facilities manager. You'll oversee maintenance operations, manage vendors, and ensure everything runs smoothly. It's a full-time position with benefits, a steady salary, and flexible hours so you can still spend time with your children. For a moment, John was speechless. The offer sounded too good to be true, and his initial reaction was skepticism. "Claire, I don't know what to say," he stammered. "I'm grateful, really, but why me? I don't have experience in corporate settings or anything like that." Claire smiled knowingly. "You underestimate yourself. Running 3 part-time jobs requires incredible organizational skills, problem-solving abilities, and leadership. Those are exactly the qualities we're looking for. Besides, you've proven yourself trustworthy and reliable. That's worth more than any degree or title." Her confidence in him was both humbling and inspiring. Slowly, John began to believe that maybe, just maybe, he could rise to the challenge. "If you're sure about this," he said cautiously, "then yes, I'll take the job." Claire's face lit up with satisfaction. "Excellent. Welcome aboard, John." Leaving the office later that evening, John felt lighter than he had in years. The road ahead wouldn't be easy. Adjusting to a new role in such a different environment would require hard work and adaptability. But for the first time in a long time, he allowed himself to imagine a future where things weren't quite so bleak. A future where he could breathe a little easier, laugh a little louder, and give Emma and Liam the stability they deserved. As he walked to the bus stop, Claire's words echoed in his mind. "Even the strongest people need a helping hand." John realized that accepting help wasn't a sign of weakness. It was an acknowledgement of humanity. And perhaps in letting others lift him up, he could find the strength to keep moving forward. John's first day at Bennett Tech Solutions was nothing short of overwhelming. As he stepped into the gleaming building, he couldn't help but feel like an outsider in a world that seemed so foreign to him. The polished floors, the hum of computers, the employees typing away on their keyboards. It was all so different from the grease-stained garages and dimly lit grocery aisles he was used to. For a moment, doubt crept in. Could he really fit into this environment? Would he be able to learn everything he needed to know? Claire must have sensed his unease because she greeted him with a warm smile as soon as he arrived. "Welcome to your new workplace," she said, extending her hand. Her tone was friendly but professional, striking just the right balance to put him at ease. "I'll introduce you to the team and show you around. Don't worry, we'll get you up to speed in no time." She led him through the office, introducing him to various departments along the way. There was Sarah from HR, who handed him a thick folder filled with company policies and training materials. Marcus, the head of IT, who promised to set him up with a laptop and access to the necessary systems, and Lisa, the facilities coordinator, who would serve as his assistant for the first few weeks. Everyone was polite and welcoming, though John couldn't shake the feeling that they were sizing him up, trying to figure out how someone with his background had landed such a prestigious role. The tour ended in a small conference room where Claire sat down with him to discuss his responsibilities. "As facilities manager, you'll oversee everything related to maintenance and operations," she explained, handing him a detailed list of tasks. "That includes coordinating repairs, managing vendors, ensuring safety protocols are followed, and keeping our workspace running smoothly. It's a big job, but I believe you're more than capable." John nodded, flipping through the pages of information. Some of it made sense. He'd spent years fixing cars and dealing with practical problems, but other aspects were completely new territory. Budget reports, vendor contracts, performance metrics, these were things he'd never encountered before. Still, Claire's confidence in him gave him a boost. If she believed he could do it, then maybe he could too. Over the next few weeks, John threw himself into learning everything he could about his new role. He spent hours poring over manuals, attending training sessions, and shadowing Lisa to understand the ins and outs of the job. At first, it felt like drinking from a fire hose. There was so much information to absorb, but gradually things began to click. He discovered that many of the skills he'd developed over the years as a mechanic and delivery driver translated surprisingly well to his new position. Problem solving, attention to detail, and a knack for multitasking, all of these qualities, proved invaluable in navigating the complexities of corporate life. One of the biggest challenges was adapting to the culture of the office. People here communicated differently than those in his previous jobs. Conversations were often formal, peppered with jargon and acronyms he didn't immediately recognize. Emails replaced casual chats, and meetings became a regular part of his routine. At first, John struggled to find his footing, worried that he might say or do something wrong, but slowly he began to adapt, observing how others interacted and mimicking their behavior until it felt natural. Despite the initial hurdles, John quickly earned the respect of his colleagues. His willingness to roll up his sleeves and tackle problems head-on impressed everyone he worked with. When a pipe burst in the basement one evening, flooding part of the storage area, John sprang into action without hesitation. He coordinated with maintenance crews, arranged for cleanup services, and ensured minimal disruption to daily operations. By the time the issue was resolved, word of his quick thinking and leadership had spread throughout the office. It wasn't just his work ethic that won people over. It was his humility and kindness. John never acted like he was above anyone else, even though his new title carried a certain level of authority. He treated janitors and executives alike with the same respect and consideration, earning their loyalty in return. During lunch breaks, he often joined junior staff members in the cafeteria, sharing stories about his kids or offering advice based on his own experiences. These small gestures went a long way in building camaraderie and trust within the team. As the months passed, John settled into his role with growing confidence. He implemented several improvements to streamline processes, saving the company both time and money. For example, he negotiated better rates with vendors and introduced a digital system for tracking maintenance requests, which significantly reduced delays. His efforts didn't go unnoticed. Claire frequently praised his contributions during executive meetings, highlighting his innovative ideas and dedication to excellence. But perhaps the most rewarding aspect of his new job was the impact it had on his personal life. With a steady salary and benefits, John was finally able to breathe a sigh of relief. He paid off his mounting bills, repaired the water heater that had been leaking for months, and even managed to save a little money each month. More importantly, he gained the flexibility to spend quality time with Emma and Liam. Instead of rushing between shifts and collapsing into bed exhausted, he now had evenings free to help Emma with her homework or play catch with Liam in the backyard. Emma noticed the change almost immediately. "Dad seems happier," she remarked one afternoon while drawing pictures at the kitchen table. Liam nodded enthusiastically. "Yeah, and he doesn't look so tired anymore." Their observation warmed John's heart. He realized that his happiness wasn't just benefiting him, it was rippling outward, touching every corner of his family's life. Still, John never forgot where he came from, or how far he'd come. On weekends, when the weather was nice, he took the kids to the park near their old apartment complex. They laughed and played together, enjoying simple pleasures that once felt out of reach. Sometimes John would sit on a bench and watch them, marveling at how much their lives had changed in such a short time. He thought back to the rainy day when he stopped to help Claire change her tire, a decision that seemed so insignificant at the moment but turned out to be life-changing. One evening, as he tucked Liam into bed, the boy looked up at him with wide eyes. "Dad, do you think good things happen because we deserve them?" he asked innocently. John paused, considering the question. "I think good things happen when we work hard and stay kind," he replied after a moment. "And sometimes they happen because someone decides to give us a chance." Liam yawned, snuggling deeper under the covers. "Well, I'm glad someone gave you a chance, Dad." John smiled, brushing a strand of hair from his son's forehead. "Me too, buddy. Me too." Though his journey was far from over, John knew he was exactly where he was meant to be. He had faced countless obstacles and emerged stronger on the other side, proving to himself and to those around him that resilience and integrity could open doors no one ever thought possible. And as he drifted off to sleep that night, listening to the peaceful silence of his home, he felt a deep sense of gratitude, not just for what he had achieved, but for the people who had helped him along the way. Life had a way of surprising John Miller, and the past year had been nothing short of extraordinary. From struggling to make ends meet as a mechanic, delivery driver, and office cleaner to becoming the facilities manager at Bennett Tech Solutions, his journey was one he never could have imagined. Every day brought new challenges but also new opportunities that allowed him to provide for his family in ways he once thought impossible. And yet, what truly amazed John wasn't just the material improvements in his life. It was the profound shift in how he viewed himself and the world around him. With his steady income and flexible schedule, John was finally able to give Emma and Liam the stability they deserved. The cramped apartment they'd lived in for years was replaced by a modest house with a backyard big enough for soccer games and summer barbecues. For the first time, the kids had their own rooms, a dream come true for Emma, who loved decorating her space with colorful posters and drawings. Liam spent hours playing outside, chasing butterflies or practicing his kicks on an old soccer net John had set up. Their laughter filled the air, a constant reminder of how far they'd come. But it wasn't just about the house or the extra money. It was about the little things, the moments that made life feel lighter, brighter, and more hopeful. On weekends, John took the kids to explore nearby parks, museums, and farmers markets. He introduced them to hobbies he'd always wanted to share, like gardening and woodworking. They built birdhouses together, planted flowers in the backyard, and even started a small vegetable patch. These activities not only brought them closer but also taught Emma and Liam valuable lessons about patience, creativity, and teamwork. John's relationship with Claire continued to grow as well, though it remained rooted in mutual respect and friendship. She often checked in with him, asking how things were going both at work and at home. Occasionally, she'd invite him to lunch or join her for casual conversations about leadership, parenting, or life in general. Through these interactions, John learned more about Claire's story, how she'd lost her father when she was young, how his values of kindness and hard work had shaped her into the person she was today. In many ways, she reminded John of Sarah, his late wife. Her warmth, determination, and generosity inspired him to keep pushing forward, no matter how tough things got. At work, John thrived in his role as facilities manager. What had initially felt overwhelming quickly became second nature, thanks to his natural problem-solving skills and willingness to learn. He streamlined processes, improved efficiency, and earned the trust of his colleagues. When a major renovation project arose, a complete overhaul of the office layout, he stepped up to lead the initiative. Coordinating architects, contractors, and employees required long hours and careful planning, but John approached the task with enthusiasm and precision. By the time the project was completed, the entire team celebrated the transformation, crediting John's leadership for its success. His contributions didn't go unnoticed. At the company's annual awards ceremony, Claire presented him with an Employee of the Year award, citing his dedication, innovation, and positive impact on the workplace. As John stood on stage accepting the accolade, he felt a lump rise in his throat. Looking out at the crowd, he saw familiar faces smiling back at him. His co-workers, his friends, and most importantly, Emma and Liam, who beamed with pride from the front row. It was a moment he would cherish forever, not because of the trophy in his hand, but because of what it represented. Proof that hard work and kindness could take you places you never dreamed of. Despite his achievements, John remained grounded. He knew better than anyone that success wasn't something to take for granted. It was something to nurture, protect, and share with others. That's why he made it a point to pay it forward whenever he could. Whether it was mentoring junior staff members at work, volunteering at local community centers, or simply stopping to help someone stranded on the side of the road, John carried the same spirit of generosity that had guided him throughout his life. One rainy afternoon, nearly a year after his encounter with Claire, John found himself driving home from work when he noticed a car pulled over on the shoulder of the highway. A young man stood beside it, looking frustrated as he stared at a flat tire. Without hesitation, John signaled and parked behind him, grabbing his toolkit from the trunk. "Need a hand?" he asked with a smile. The young man looked surprised, but grateful. "You don't have to do this," he said, echoing Claire's words from so long ago. It's no trouble, John replied, kneeling down to assess the situation. As he worked, loosening lug nuts and hoisting the jack, he couldn't help but reflect on how much had changed since that fateful day. Back then, he'd been struggling to keep his head above water, unsure if he'd ever find solid ground again. Now here he was, helping someone else in need, not because he expected anything in return, but because it was the right thing to do. When the job was done, the young man thanked him profusely, pressing a $20 bill into his hand. John shook his head firmly, pushing the money back toward him. "No need," he said simply. "Just glad I could help." As he drove away, John glanced at the rearview mirror, watching the young man wave goodbye. A sense of fulfillment washed over him, filling him with quiet joy. Life had come full circle in a way he hadn't anticipated. The simple act of changing a tire had not only changed his life, but had also become a lesson he now passed on to others. Kindness creates ripples, touching lives in ways we may never fully understand. That evening, as John sat at the kitchen table with Emma and Liam coloring pictures in front of him, he reflected on everything he'd been through. The struggles, the sacrifices, the moments of doubt, they had all led him here to this place of peace and gratitude. He realized that while he couldn't control every challenge life threw his way, he could choose how he responded. And by choosing kindness, resilience, and hope, he had transformed not only his own life but also the lives of those around him. "Dad," Emma said suddenly, holding up a drawing, "this is us." John leaned closer, studying the picture. It showed their new house, the backyard, and the three of them standing together under a bright sun. In the corner, she had written 4 words: "Our happy family forever." Tears welled up in John's eyes as he hugged her tightly. "I love it, sweetheart," he whispered, "and I love you." Looking at Liam, who grinned mischievously beside him, John felt a deep sense of contentment. No matter what the future held, he knew they would face it together as a family. Because sometimes the smallest gestures, a flat tire changed, a helping hand extended, a chance given, could lead to the greatest blessings. And for John Miller, those blessings were right here, in the laughter of his children and the promise of tomorrow.